Game of Thrones jumped the shark in season 8. No, they jumped the shark in season 7. Incorrect. They jumped the shark all the way back in season 5. And our first inkling of it, this storyline. Littlefinger selling off Sansa Stark is one of the most incomprehensible storylines in this entire series. So please allow me to walk you through why this is an insane plot point, what I think they were trying to do with it, and what is actually happening in the books at this point. Point number 1, why this is crazy. I'm going to say this as plainly as I can. There is no universe where Peter Littlefinger Baelish would ever willingly part with Sansa Stark and send her off to be abused by another man. Littlefinger loves Sansa Stark in a bizarre and not healthy way. It's an obsession. So the notion that he would just give her away, his prize, his pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, is actually insane and doesn't make any sense. But please, do not take my word for it. I could be pulling this out of my ass. Take George R. R. Martin's word for it. Behold, printed quotes. This is from an interview that George did for a book, I believe it was called Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon. It's like behind the scenes, making of the show, etc., etc. But in it, he says, "My Littlefinger would have never turned Sansa over to Ramsay," Martin said in an interview. "Never. He's obsessed with her. Half the time he thinks she's the daughter he never had, that he wishes he had if he'd married Catelyn, and half the time he thinks she is Catelyn, and he wants her for himself." Ew! He continues, he's not going to give her to somebody who would do bad things to her. That's going to be very different in the books. And so this is the crux of the issue. Littlefinger, as established in the books, is basically trying to recreate the lost romance of his past because he doesn't have Catelyn. Catelyn has fully and totally rejected him multiple times in his childhood and in the present day. Also, she's not there anymore. I mean, she's all like zombified, but like, he doesn't know that, We know that Littlefinger is trying to play a giant Game of Thrones, a giant game of chess, where he ends up in charge of everything at the end. That is his goal. He has had nothing, and he's lost most of the things he's wanted in his life because he comes from nothing, so he is rigging the entire game and playing all of these families against each other, hoping that in the end, he will be able to play it so that he ends up on top. But along with this pursuit of power for the sake of making up for all the things he lost when he didn't have power, he also wants to make up for the literal things he lost, namely the love he couldn't have in Catelyn Stark, which he is now recreating in Sansa. It's icky. He's icky. Fuck this man. But this is his goal. He wants to rule, and he wants to rule with her because then he feels like he has recovered everything that he lost. So if that's his ultimate goal, giving her away, allowing her to be abused in that manner doesn't make any sense because this is wifey in the end in his ideal situation. And the books make this clear in the juxtaposition between the two women that he's treating very differently, like revolving around him in this situation. Because there's Sansa, who he is keeping right by his side in the Vale, and then there is the girl who does get sold to Ramsay, and that's Sansa's friend, her like childhood friend named Jane Poole. So in the books, it's Jane Poole who is sold to the Boltons, and they are pretending that Jane Poole is Arya. You can see what the showrunners were kind of trying to do as they like streamlined this, where they took these two distinct storylines that concern, related female characters in a sense, because these were two childhood best friends. Sansa Stark and Jane Poole were childhood besties. They were kind of like little mean girls together when they were, young and shitty. And Littlefinger has custody of both of them. So eventually he keeps Sansa Stark in the Vale with himself because, this is the one he cares about. And then Jane Poole, the one he doesn't give a shit about, is the one that gets sold as the fake Arya to the Boltons. And this is so important because it's showing the two young girls in Littlefinger's control how he treats them differently. They contrast each other. You see how much he cares about Sansa, how much he values her in how he treats her, where he keeps her, etc. And Jane Poole, it's the exact opposite. He doesn't give a shit about her. So what does he do? He sells her to the sadistic Boltons. There are rumors swirling everywhere about Ramsay Snow at the time, eventually Ramsay Bolton, and like the unhinged nature of him. He's out of his mind. Littlefinger is like Varys. He has like his little birds, his little network of spies everywhere. He knows what Ramsay Bolton is like. He's not going to give the person he cares about to him. He's gonna give the girl that he doesn't give a shit about. Why did the show do this, ultimately? What is the reason, besides the obvious of like, oh, well, we're streamlining the plot because we don't like complexity. Let's get rid of Jane Poole. We don't know her. We don't care about her. And we'll just give Sansa her plot. That'll work, right? Two birds with one stone. Well, yes, but I don't think that's quite the end of it. I think that they thought that they were doing something very interesting, and I think that they thought that they were helping Sansa along in her character's growth, which is fucking bullshit. In my opinion, from D&D's perspective, D&D being the showrunners, they think that character growth and advancement only happens through violence. And I can see kind of where they may have formed this idea, because we do have a lot of our main characters experiencing violence early on, and eventually that does propel them, inform their evolution going forward. This is where I think they lose the thread. They think that violence that is enacted on the characters is necessary in perpetuity to keep them evolving, and that is not the case in these books. Yes, these characters might suffer a traumatic event, and it informs them going forward, but you do not keep needing more and more traumatic events to continue to progress. Sansa experiences trauma when she gets to King's Landing. She loses Lady, she loses her father, she is abused by Joffrey. It's horrible. But in all of that, she is learning things and learning how to protect herself in the way that she, as a woman in this world, can. And it's not that the trauma teaches her how to do it. The trauma changes her worldview so that she gains a greater picture of what the world actually is and learns how to start controlling the elements that she can. And then from that point, we watch her begin to employ these new skills, this new understanding of the world, now that she isn't as idealistic as she once was, and begin to make more moves, control her own path more and more. She gains awareness where she had none before, where she had filled her head with the beauty of the songs and the narratives that she had grown up with. Now she's understanding the real nature of the world and can start moving through it. D&D don't seem to value this style of growth and these methods for controlling the world around you, because it isn't as exciting, I guess you could say. But I think it's very important, because this is inherently a woman-centric style of growth and storytelling here. This is a woman learning what it is to be a woman in this world and learning how to navigate it with her specific constraints. Sansa Stark does not have the same freedom of movement that the other male characters have, and so she has to find her own way. She has to find the woman-centric way of figuring out this world, of manipulating situations so that she doesn't get harmed. But D&D do not seem to value that. So what do? Well, we have to put her through more violence. We have to continually violate her until she has grown cold, until she has grown violent herself and is now perpetrating violence against others. Because that's the only way we get to grow. But as we've established, that isn't the point. None of this storyline makes sense with the pieces on the board. They don't make sense with Littlefinger and his obsession, his feeling towards her. It doesn't make sense with her journey of learning how to manipulate the world in the only way that she can. It's turning her into a generic male baddie, essentially. That is such a sad oversimplification, dumbing down of where she seems to be going. In the books, she is learning from Littlefinger. She's learning from the guy who is best at this. But she's learning it from her own perspective. Littlefinger, at the end of the day, is still a man who has blind spots, who has huge blind spots, because his privilege has given him enough wiggle room to do kind of whatever he wants, and then he gets to play his game on top of it. Sansa has a higher awareness. Limitations breed creativity. She has been constrained in more ways than Littlefinger ever has. So learning Littlefinger's ways with a far more developed mind, without those same blind spots that he has, is going to be a dangerous combination, especially for Littlefinger. No, not in the piss poor way the show did it. Anyway, please tell me in the comments, what do you want me to talk about next? And also say goodbye to the hair. I am getting it cut tomorrow, so these flowing locks, this is the last time you're seeing them. Okay, good night!